Hi and welcome to the waterfall painting session. So a lot of you have been asking for instruction on how to paint water. So I thought we'd do a waterfall, and one of the waterfalls from the 4 waterfall walk in the South Brecon Beacons. Look it up, there's lots of pictures, it's really beautiful. So I've lightly sketched this out, just main marks here. I don't know if you can see them, but you'll see them when I start filling them in with masking fluid. And I've got some masking fluid here, and it's blue masking fluid, so you can see it on the picture. I find it really useful because other masking fluids tend to be a sort of creamy colour, which is too similar to the paper, the colour of the paper. So, and I've got a Chinese ink bamboo pen here, which is ideal for this job, because what happens is the masking fluid goes off on the pen and then you can peel it off. Whereas if you use a brush, it sticks to your hairs and then you can't get it off. So try and find an implement that will allow you to put this masking fluid on without ruining your brushes. And I'm just going to put it on fairly thick in places and fairly thin in places as well. So I'm going to leave some gaps, and so like over on the left hand side where it's quite densely white, I'll put more masking fluid, but on the edges I'll just have some marks here and there. The other benefit of using this pen is that it comes to a point, which is often quite difficult to achieve with other tools. Okay, so a little bit of roughness just there. And then you've got things like some branches here that are in highlight, so they're sort of catching the light. And I'm going to do those as well, because they'll be difficult to put back in over the top of the watercolour. So again, I'm just flicking the branches like I would with the brush, so I get a tip, a fine tip at the end. There's another load coming over here which I like as well, so I'm just going to block those out. So all we're doing with this is we're reserving the whites. Okay, so if you've got some masking fluid, then great. If you haven't, then you can use white gouache to mix some branch colours later on. There's a few sort of squiggly marks here as well. I'm just going to put the odd one in. Just be careful with your mark making though, because it does really show if you haven't observed well these marks that have happened in the distance. So, you know, don't just randomly make up the marks. Observe them well. And then we come down here and we've got a strip here. There's a rock here, a rock there, and then there's a strip of sort of light where the sand, the raised area on the riverbed, is catching the light. So I'm going to put some white colour there as well, but I'm going to leave it there. Okay, So once you've done that, just leave your tools to dry to one side, and then you can peel the masking off. Put your lid on, make sure you always do this and really tight, because otherwise it goes off. And you can use the edge of brushes. I've got some brushes, I don't know if I've got any here, that have very pointed ends. I don't think I have. But some of the brushes will have sharp points on the ends here, and you can use those. You can use sort of old ink pens, cotton buds. You can even get masking fluid brushes. So see what you can find to put this stuff on with. And then you just leave this to dry. I don't recommend that you hair dryer it, because it tends to affect the bonding between the masking fluid and the paper. So effectively what we're going to do, if you don't know how to use this, is we're going to paint over it. We're going to let it dry first, paint over it, and then once we've finished the painting, you peel the masking fluid off. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply some green to the top section here. We're going to put a little bit of green here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have to negative paint this dark area in the middle, and then we can bring the dark area down the bottom into the water. So I'm going to just so I can reserve the brightness of the greens, I'm going to put some yellow, some cadmium yellow just around here, and it's quite strong. Don't be frightened of the strength of it. We want to keep this really vibrant. And then I'm going to take a fan brush, which I thought I had. Hang on, yes I did. Okay, and I'm just going to drag, oops, just knocked the paint, the camera, sorry, down, just to soften those areas up a bit. I'm just going to drag down with a fan brush. If you haven't got a fan brush, then you can use just a normal acrylic brush, and then pop some here, just a little around that area and around here, and again just sort of flick it around so it's not so clumsy with the mark making. Okay, then next we're going to use a sponge. Okay, so you need to mix in one of your dimples or whatever here, maybe. I've got a bit of blue there, I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to add some yellow into it and make a green. If you've already got greens, then you can use them, but just be careful with the intensity of them. They can be quite harsh, so I tend to mix a colour in with them just to knock them back. So I've just put a little bit of purple in there. Okay, and all you're going to do is you're going to dip your sponge into that mix. Try and get it quite full, so it's like that. And then we're just going to put a whole load of marks over the top of these marks that we've already made. Like that. Just to get some texture going, I'm just going to make up a bit more green because I didn't make up enough. Quite a bit of water in there, and have it dropping down. Now we might put some more foliage in, but not yet. Okay, there we go. That's just like an undercoat really. And then the next stage is to mix up a brown colour. I've got a burnt umber here, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of purple because a lot of the rock around this area has red purpley tones to it. So if you mix a bit of those colours in, then you'll find that you'll end up with something that looks similar to what's around here. So, and then we go in with a big brush and we're just going to work negatively into these areas with little sort of nervous hands like this. Okay, so you're sort of, not only are you painting the rock face, but you're suggesting the rock that's coming down off, sorry, the falling foliage around these, and you can paint over the waterfall, that's fine. Yeah, so it goes up there, there's a sort of an area just there and another area of flat rock in there. Try and do this as quickly as you can, and try and remember just to pat up into the foliage a bit like that. You can leave gaps, no problem, and it comes all the way across there into that tree area there. Okay, while it's still wet, if you take some darker brown and really go in, and you can darken your brown up by adding some black or some Payne's grey into the mix. Drop some darker tones and also work across in lines like this, just to get some depth of colour into those rock features like there. That's really dark under there. It's quite dark in here also, and the darkness comes down just above that. You can also add some purples in if you want to sort of enrich the colour that's coming through. Okay, don't forget to work over here as well. All right, and leave it quite loose. You don't want it to be too harsh. I'm just going to put some there. All right, you can pat up into these areas a little bit with a bit more detail. You can also take your fan brush and flick a bit of those colours just into those areas like we did in reverse, like that. Okay. The other thing you can do with the fan brush is you can work into the water with it. So you can just sort of bring in a sort of, you pick up the colour on your fan brush and then you do sort of swirly shapes like this. It's really useful actually. Swirly shapes. That will give you some texture in the water. And the other thing to do with the fan brush is if you mix up a blue tone. So I'm going to use a cerulean or a cobalt blue. I'm just going to pick that up and I'm just going to put in some, just drag it across like this. Same here, over from the left, drag it across, but put in some swirly marks as well, just so it doesn't get too rigid. Okay, take a fine brush, pick up some blue, and you can work in some more defined areas. You can do this while it's still wet, like that. try and leave some white areas showing. There's a rock here somewhere, right? Don't overdo this bit. But it is quite a useful thing to have. It's just some definition of mark making. The simplicity of the application of colour will help with this picture. So sort of less is more, really. Right. If you want to darken up areas in the background, you can go in and you can just put in the level, where the level of the water is. There should be a line of colour, and you can just put in some flashes here and there of darker pigment. And if you need to darken it up here around these bits where there are more sort of lines, then you can do that. Sort of details coming down here like this. And there's sort of little patches. This takes practice, so don't worry if you don't get it right first time. It's a sort of fiddly little job, but you do need there's an element of confidence in sort of applying these loose marks, and that does come from confidence. So, you know, do one. If it's not quite what you're after, do another one. You know, do smaller versions and larger versions. There's no quick fix to this. It's just practice. I'm just going to put some patches of heavier colour up here with a smaller brush, using a nervous hand, like I said, just a sort of twitchy. I mean, you can go in and do this with a sponge again if you want to, so that you get some more definition. If I just press that down with my finger, you know, just pat in your colours like that with your sponge. You can do this with like a stipply effect if you want to. Just going to put a little bit over here. Okay. Now I would let that dry off, and then I'm going to apply some rocks. Okay. Okay, so now we should put the rocks in. So we've got this sort of really vibrant, mossy rock down the foreground here. And this just acts like a stepping stone, really, into the painting. So if you put the lighter area down first, and then just add some darker pigment into the rock, like that. And then take some brown or something just to do the area that's in shadow. Again, you might need to come back and just darken this up a little. And the other thing to remember is that you need to sort of put in the marks that come off into the water. So all you need to do is drag some of the pigment out like that, and just put some little marks in the water where the water is colliding with the stone. I'm just going to add a little bit more brown into this, like that. Okay, you can put as many rocks in as you please, but don't have them too sort of dominant, or don't have too many. They can become a sort of little bit repetitive, especially with mark making. So just put the odd one here and there. There's another one just here, I'll put that one in. That one's quite good. I'm going to darken it up a bit though. I'm going to put some shadows on these ones, like that. There's a couple of little ones in the water. I mean, you might want to do more, it's up to you. I'm going to come under here, I'm just going to darken that line where the water's edge is, just all the way along there, so that we know that that is the end of the surface where the rock is. Just put in some, again, you can come in and you can put darker lines in, but use this sort of S-shaped thing going on like that. Can you see? Just very elongated S shapes. Okay, so the last thing to do, well, one of the last things to do, is just to define this rock. I'm just going to put a little bit of black just along the top, just broken line, just because we want to know it's there, and underneath where the shadow is. And drag some pigment down underneath there. It also carries on sort of under there like that. So I'm not going to make a big deal of that because I don't want that to be the focus. I want the waterfall to be the focus. And then underneath, inside the waterfall, where I haven't put any pigment, I'm just going to go over, and hopefully those gaps that I've left will fill in with that pigment. Okay, the other thing I wanted to do was to just quickly put in some, I've got a little bit of colour left on my, I just want to put the suggestion of some green there. A little bit more hanging over like that. Okay, dry it off again. Okay, so I think that's dry. Clear your work surface away, your materials, so that you can have some movement. And the best way to do removal of masking fluid is to work from the outside in. So on the branches, start on the tips of the branches and just rub very gently. You can do this with a rubber as well, rather than your finger if you don't like rubbing. And just gently, don't be tempted to pull it. Just gently rub away, and you can see how those masking fluid marks add to the picture now. Now, if you've made a mistake and you don't like the mark that has been left behind, then you can just paint over it. It's no problem. But it is really helpful with reserving highlights. You may not use them as white highlights. Be careful with the larger areas. They tend to pull the paper much easier than smaller areas, and we don't want to pull the paper. Just work in short movements. I can see it's pulling ever so slightly, so go from the other side and start to work away, and hopefully that will come off in, yeah, that's good. And then don't forget you've got some masking fluid down here on the bottom. Try and make sure that you've got every single bit of it off. There we go. I don't think I put it anywhere else. Okay, so now what we've got is this waterfall. And by the way, the waterfalls are called, I've got to pronounce this in Welsh, Sgwd Clwn Gwyn, Sgwd Isaf Clwn Gwyn, Sgwd y Panur, or Panir, Sgwd y Aira. So that means fall of the white meadow, lower fall of the white meadow, fall of the woolen washer, and fall of the snow. So check them out, go and have a look. Part of the waterfall country in Gwaun, Hepst, South Brecon Beacons. Some beautiful walks up there, and this is one of them. Okay, so the last thing to do is, there's very rarely just pure whites in anything. Whites tend to be off colours. If you look at a sheep, they're not white, they're actually sort of yellows, things like that. So these branches, for example, they need a bit of colour. So I'm going to use a burnt sienna here, and I'm just going to colour in these. Just give, you can leave a little bit of the white exposed, but they're not white, you know. So just paint over the white area. It's just nice to have a little bit of white showing through, and that's where the light would catch. So you need to do that with all of your branches. Just lightly touch them with a bit of colour, just so that they don't look like it's, you know, the middle of winter. You can also add some extra branches in if you want to, or change the colour. The thing to remember is to make sure that you use a fine brush. Oh, I missed one there, look. There you go. Use a fine brush if you're going to extend these branches in any way. Just knock them back a bit. So if you're going to use more branches, then take a really, you know, detailed brush like this. Go into your whatever colour you want to go into, and then you can just sort of put in some branches coming off of those branches from the foliage into your composition. Don't be frightened to crisscross the branches. They can fall down into the background rock, you know. Just do them broken so that they don't look too rigid. Okay, that's all right actually. I'm just going to put another couple here. They will dry lighter, and there'll just be a slight suggestion there of mark. Okay, so now the water. So this section I'm just going to pretty much leave, I think, as I'm going to leave the rest of the water. But the waterfall itself, just take, I'm just using like old blues that are just staining my palette, and all you need to do is just drag really delicately some blue lines down into this waterfall. We don't have to colour the whole thing, and it's really good if you get different blues going on rather than just single blues. Maybe a bit of purple here and there, but again, don't overwork it. The more you do of this, the more you'll mess it up. Okay, so just a suggestion like that. The bottom sections, you can put a little bit of coloration in there. This is sort of shingle, whoops. So what you could do is take a really old acrylic brush like this one, and you could just do some stipple marks. So I'm just picking up some colour on this palette, not too wet. I don't know if you can see that, just a bit of colour on the end, and I'm just going to stipple into that section because it's quite gravelly, and it would be nice to have a little bit of texture in that area just to describe what's going on. I'm just going to darken that up a bit, like this. Can you see? Just a little bit of stipply texture, just to tell us that that area there is sort of very thin and gravelly. Okay, you could even put some on the ends of this area here. You can get sort of different amounts on your brush. Just here like that. I've got to put some yellow in there or something. Like that there. That's better. Can you see how that's working now? Okay, now just look at it now and see what's not working. And what I need is a little bit of darkness just in here. I'm going to take some, I've only got black here at the moment, so I'm just going to take some black. I'm just going to increase the depth of colour in that area there, just so that we have some, be careful around your waterfall, just a little bit more drama with the depth of tone coming through underneath this area here. Black and greys, they tend to sort of fade into nothing. It's really quite amazing how they work around the waterfall, maybe like that. Just a touch here, like that. And again, I'm just going to take you can use a sponge or you can use your fan brush. I'm just going to drag the fan brush across those marks like that and down like that. Okay, just to sort of break up that mark that I made. Okay, I think I might just put a little bit of dark blue just here. I'm just drawing the eye into the waterfall here by applying a bit of colour along that edge. Just there. I'm going to put a little bit in side the marks that I've made there. You see? Maybe a touch there as well. Just on that edge. Touch in there. Just by adding a bit of colour there, that will draw your eye into the picture. And we've got also, I'm just going to define this area here with a little bit of purple where the edge of that water is. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm frightened of overworking it. All right, So there we are. Like I said, you must practice with these watery images. There's loads of things online. There's other tutorials on my YouTube channel about how to paint water. So go and have a look at those. Check out other artists' work. Look at David Bellamy, not the horticulturist, but the painter. He's still here. He lives in mid Wales. He does a lot of waterfalls. So have a look. All right. Hope you enjoy it. Like I said, if it doesn't work first time, don't worry. Just have another go. And maybe look for some other images that you enjoy. Okay. Bye for now. See you next time.